often said that it's terrifying appearing in front of royalty, particularly if you are a performer, and particularly really in the golden age, because it could make or break you. And you know, it's hard to imagine because there's sort of a slight ruffle and butterflies in the stomach, knowing that there's no going back once you stand on that stage. And even if you catch the eye of the royal box, you know, I like the old joke about, you know, oh yes, I've appeared in front of many kings and queens. I've sang in front of King George, the Prince of Wales. Oh, many pubs. It's so true, isn't it? When you think about it with celebrities. But you see, way back at the very start of the very first Royal Variety performance, even that was full of controversy. And that's all because it was down to a male impersonator, His Majesty the King and Queen Mary. As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for your time today. Yes, as a performer, oh sorry, we'll have a wave. As a performer, terrible, nerve-wracking thing. Michael Crawford told me, we're having a coffee in the Palladium, as you do, you know, and he told me that because he was so late on the bill, he had to keep going wandering around the block because nerves were taking the best of him. And because there were so many performers in that royal show that year, well, he was in a sort of room up inside a pub somewhere in Argyle Street, just up from the Palladium, because there wasn't enough room. Even a huge star like him has got to slum it, you know. He said by the time he got there, he was so relieved just to get the performance over, but he didn't like to think about it. And even now, if he saw the footage, he felt very nervous. Strange to think, isn't it? But way back in 1912, Queen Mary and King George attended the very first Royal Command performance. And what was fascinating about this is this was all put together to help struggling artists who maybe have fallen foul of managers, agents, you know, all the things that still happen today, who couldn't necessarily make ends meet. And the idea was put on a big show, and then of course the money would go to these particular individuals. And so a spectacular performance was put together. Sadly though, missing were the true artists, because originally when this was first thought through, this was actually put together by King Edward, you know, the idea of it. And then sadly when he passed, it was taken over by King George. Now, King George and Queen Mary were very Edwardian, to say the least, right? And they decided upon who could they put on. So they decided that they couldn't have risque performances like Mary Lloyd. Oh no, because she was just too near the knuckle. That would be like booking Madonna, you know, at the height of her fame, and asking them to appear in front of the late Queen Elizabeth, you know, all the raunchy acts. You couldn't have it. I mean, it's tame by today's standards, but just the wink and the innuendo, way too much. But one act that really, according to a, you know, great source that looked into the history, told me all about the fact that, well, way back, literally at the start of this particular show, one act that they booked, and they had all the big names of the day, Little Titch, Harry Lauder, Fanny Fields, all, and it's hard to imagine, these were huge names of the music hall. But because the King and the Queen had decided to go along, they said, well, you know, we had to be careful what we put on. And one act was the brilliant male impersonator, Vesta Tilly. Right? Now, what the act of Vesta Tilly today, really, some might say a few years later, could have been slightly borrowed by the wonderful Hollywood star, the German-born actress Marlene Dietrich. You know, she was very keen to appear in certain movies like Dishonored and Blue Angel, dressed in, you know, top hat tails, all of that sort of stuff. Back then, that was considered very risque indeed. I mean, shockingly risque. Hard to imagine now. And apparently when she came on, Queen Mary put her program to her face because she knew that this wasn't a man, this was a woman dressed as a man, and she, oh no. So basically Vesta Tilly didn't go down as well, because once he'd seen that, they thought, well, if the Queen doesn't like it, we shouldn't like it. But behind the scenes, another thing developed. Always lovely to share these inside tracks with you, because the idea to diffuse the situation of Vesta Tilly being a man on the stage was a very quick change at the end of the song. The orchestra plays, and in order to shock the audience, the King would walk on with Vesta Tilly, now dressed as the female, the woman that she was. But because of this act seemingly so risque, literally midway, a message was sent from the royal box of, I think not. So then Vesta Tilly had to finish her act, his act, whatever you want to call it at the time, to rather lackluster affair. And that really was because it wasn't necessarily a negative from the king or the queen. They just felt the audience weren't ready for that. Was the king endorsing this rather strange and, you know, quite frankly, shocking act of that particular era? And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that when you think about it, we had Princess Diana dancing, of course, beautifully at the Royal Ballet with Wayne's sleeve. We've had so many royal cameos since then, including our brilliant monarch Queen Elizabeth as a Bond girl and Paddington. Not risque, I know, but nonetheless, still rather risky. But way back in 1912, you couldn't simply take that risk. And that's how the male impersonator Vesta Tilly wasn't quite the hit of the very first Royal Command performance. In fact, it will be 7 years until the next Royal Command performance took place. This was blamed upon, of course, the First World War. Many others felt there were other reasons. As ever, I'd love to know what you think to this particular story, and be kind and polite in the comments below. Neil Shaw, Kensington, London.